From 1965 to 1977, Srila Prabhupada traveled the world preaching, working tirelessly translating his books, while at the same time keeping in constant communication with his disciples through personal letters. It is through these letters that we are able to derive life lessons, material and spiritual, as well as appreciate Srila Prabhupada's loving care for his disciples. Let us now hear from one of those fortunate devotees who personally received correspondence from His Divine Grace.
I joined the Hare Krishna movement in Paris, France in 1971 without ever having seen the devotees before anywhere, including the United States, even though my body was made in America. As a bhakta, I joined a team of devotees who went to Switzerland to start a temple where there were none in Geneva. The next year, I came on a trip back to Paris for Brahmin initiation, which Prabhupada gave to me personally. We were alone in the room. That was novel for me. And after giving me the instructions, the mantra, the Brahmin thread, Prabhupada said, "So, would you like to worship the deity?" And I said, "I would like to do whatever you want me to do, Prabhupada." And he kind of expressed a lack of satisfaction. At least it looked that way to me. He said, "I'm asking you if you would like to worship the deity." And it never crossed my mind that, this could be about Prabhupada asking me what I want, but I thought it would be just Prabhupada telling me what he wanted, which I was perfectly ready to do. Foolishly, I repeated the same answer. And then Prabhupada understood I couldn't understand what he was asking me. So he switched gears and he said, "What is your present service?" I said, "I am preaching in Geneva, Switzerland." And Prabhupada immediately said, "Preaching is our number one activity. Go back to Geneva, Switzerland and continue your preaching. Deity worship is secondary." And I took that as a life's mission instruction. And I went back to Switzerland, imbued with that guidance from Prabhupada. We would do Harinam every day on the street. We had a great Harinam leader in Lochanananda Prabhu, who was my temple president back then. But in due course of time, the police swept us up, told us the chanting was not permitted and that we couldn't come back. So I wrote Srila Prabhupada when we came back to Switzerland again, which was that trip when I was in Switzerland. And I wrote Prabhupada on January 24th, 1973, telling him about all the difficulties doing Harinam. And 2 weeks later, Prabhupada's letter floated in from Melbourne, Australia. And he wrote, "Please accept my blessings. I am in due receipt of your letter and have noted the contents carefully. I am very much encouraged to hear of your increased Sankirtan movement and your return to Geneva to open up still another chapter in Lord Chaitanya's conquest of the world. As far as police problems are concerned, this is going on all over the world, especially here in Melbourne, Australia. They are being persecuted by the police. Even they are going to jail daily, but still they will not stop their chanting and distributing. When they go to jail, they refuse to eat the food. And in this way, as much public sympathy is aroused. So eventually the police will accept us and our Sankirtan activities will go on unchecked. Simply, we must have the determination to continue our preaching work under all circumstances." I couldn't believe that Prabhupada wrote me back a letter. We were not encouraged to write Prabhupada because Prabhupada was too busy. but apparently not. He replied to all the letters I ever wrote him, and renewed vigor, we went back on the street, and I started a campaign uh, with reaching out to civic leaders, religious leaders, the police department. I eventually got an appointment with the Minister of Police and Justice and assured him that we would do the Harinam in such a way that traffic and pedestrian flow would never be disturbed, and we would keep moving around so the office workers and the shopkeepers wouldn't have to be assaulted by kartals and drums 6 to 8 hours a day. And at that point, there was a change in the Minister of Police and Justice. The previous one who had banned us was known as Henry the Billy Club because he was a heavy law and order guy, the nightclub Billy Club cop. But the new one encouraged us to come back and said, please follow the rules and there will be no problem. And from that point on, there never was. So I realized that interacting with the authorities, the leaders of the canton and city of Geneva, this was a path to being understood and accepted. And then Prabhupada, a year later, indicated that he was going to visit Geneva. That was on a tour that took him to Rome, Geneva, Paris, and Germany. And so I thought, Prabhupada got a reception from the topmost municipal authorities in this beautiful building in Paris. Why can't we do that in Geneva? And so the same Minister of Police and Justice was there, and they approved it. And that's the fabulous time where Prabhupada was received in the Palace of Government of the Republican Canton of Geneva, as they call themselves, in the very same room as Pope Paul VI 5 years earlier. And Prabhupada listened to a brief welcome, perfunctory welcome speech. And Prabhupada was supposed to basically say, thank you very much. But Prabhupada decided to give a mini Bhagavatam class to the president of the Republican Canton of Geneva. And he was looking at his chief of protocol like, what's going on here? Didn't he get the memo? Wasn't he told? But Prabhupada lured him in and he became interested. He listened attentively. And then when he could have escaped, when Prabhupada asked him, do you have any questions? Just like he did at the end of any Bhagavatam class, the man couldn't resist asking a question. And the question was, if all the young people of Geneva join your movement, what will happen to the Swiss economy? Well, Prabhupada had explained Varnashram Dharma, the duties of Brahmins and Kshatriyas. He talked about when there is yagya, like Sankirtan yagya, there will be rain and there will be grains. And Prabhupada explained to him that we are contributing members of society. We are not beggars. Prabhupada saw many other leading civic leaders, scientists from the European Center for Nuclear Research, from the World Health Organization, where he was invited to speak, the International Labor Office, the Dean of Theology of the University of Geneva, leading Sanskrit professors, and one special Orientalist who taught at the university and had just finished a book on Krishna. It had taken him 20 years to write this book, he claimed, and it was approved by all the sadhus and babas in Vrindavan to whom he showed it. And the title of his book was The Yoga of Love, the Gesture of Krishna. So the evening before this fellow was going to come meet Prabhupada, I went into Prabhupada's room. I was very fortunate I could just go in and out of Prabhupada's room for 10 days and ask him questions and talk with him and get guidance from Prabhupada. I said, Srila Prabhupada, Jean Herbert, this distinguished leader of thought and philosophy about Krishna and other things, is coming tomorrow morning. Would you like to hear something that he wrote in this book about Krishna that just now got published? And Prabhupada, nodded his head like he did. And I sat down next to Prabhupada. The book was all in French, so I was sight translating to Prabhupada directly from the French. And Prabhupada listened carefully. It appeared to me that he wasn't all that pleased with what he was hearing because of the content. And at one point, Prabhupada, did the head move again, indicating that's enough, I got it. Anyway, the next day, when he came into Prabhupada's room, he was a hulk of a man, easily like 6'2". Prabhupada, of course, I think much, at 5'4", 5'5". And his girth and his birth filled the room. He walked in, filling the room, and said to Prabhupada, "Oh, Swamiji, I'm so glad to meet you. I've written a book which has taken me 20 years about Krishna." And Prabhupada, with a deadpan look on his face, said, "And still there are mistakes. Please sit down." So it started out that way. And Jean Herbert sat down. And then Prabhupada told him that the only way to understand Krishna is by satisfying Krishna. And Prabhupada quoted certain verses like Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto and other verses which I will recite from a letter that Prabhupada wrote me. That's the second letter coming up. Prabhupada said, "These young boys and girls are in the age of enjoyment, but they have given up all desire for enjoyment to satisfy Krishna and chant the holy names and follow the regulative principles which Prabhupada enumerated." Jean Bell said, "Oh, I could follow all those rules if I wanted to, but I don't want to." And then Prabhupada said to him, "Therefore, it will take you many, many lives to realize Krishna." From that point on, Herbert didn't really think that he was going to impress Prabhupada all that much. Prabhupada was very gracious. Herbert said, "I think it's time for me to go." Prabhupada said, "I have this one book. I think you will find it very interesting." Prabhupada reached over the desk table and handed it to him. It was Nectar of Devotion. And suddenly the room seemed void of this huge presence. He was on his way out. After that, in the room was Satsvarup Maharaj and Hansaduta, Pushta Krishna, Yogeshvara. There was a little post-meeting evaluation. I said, "Prabhupada, he seemed a bit of a demon." Prabhupada said, "He just has had bad association with Mayavadis. When you were reading to me from his book yesterday evening, I could see that everywhere there is the name Krishna this, Krishna that, Krishna. He will be greatly benefited because he has said the name and written the name Krishna so many times." And on September 1st, 3 months after his visit, I wrote Prabhupada. And I'll read to you that letter and conclude with that. Prabhupada wrote, "My dear Guru Gauranga Das, please accept my blessings. I'm in due receipt of your letter and have carefully noted its contents. Regarding the remarks of Professor Jean Herbert, in Bhagavad Gita, we find no instruction except devotional service or bhakti yoga. We have to prove this from the statements of the Gita. We cannot accept the interpretation of an outsider." And I understood that Prabhupada was trying to reinforce the teachings that we had imbibed by reading his books personally, almost as if Prabhupada was wanting to give me a booster shot so I wouldn't be allured by any of the impersonalist interpretations that Jean Herbert had written in his book, the, the dust kicked up by the hooves of the cows and calves means this, and Radharani means that, and this means. No, Prabhupada was saying Krishna can tell us what he means and what he wants, and no outsider can explain Krishna better than he did himself in Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada wrote, regarding karma yoga, the Lord says, Yad karoshi yadashnasi yad johosi dadasi yat, yad tapasyasi konteya, tad kurushvad madarpanam. This madarpanam is bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga. Sometimes non-devotees object that Prabhupada would translate the word yoga as devotional service or bhakti yoga. But as Prabhupada continued to write, the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam jamanamante jnanavangmang prapadyate. This means that jnana alone is not good unless the jnani surrenders to Krishna. Unless one does so, his knowledge is not perfect. Similarly, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Sarvadharman parityaja, mang ekang sharanam braja. This is the ultimate goal, to surrender to the Supreme Lord. This is the end of yoga. The whole letter that Prabhupada wrote was just one verse after another, reinforcing what he expected us to know and live. And the last verse he quoted in this letter was, Krishna also says at the end of the 6th chapter, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantaratmana. Of all yogis, karma yoga, hatha yoga, etc., one who always thinks of Krishna is the first-class yogi. We are teaching people to become first-class yogis in Krishna consciousness. So I believe that was the last letter I got from Prabhupada. I'd received a few, I got 4 altogether. And I'm so glad I wrote those letters to him, to Srila Prabhupada, because these are treasures that I have preserved carefully all these years. So, Hare Krishna.
Thank you for sharing. All glories to Prabhupada.